when the killing stops, my crying will stop.
My name is Debbie Bodkin. I'm a sergeant with the Waterloo Regional Police, and I'm just starting my 22nd year with them. In about grade 9, I decided I wanted to be a police officer. I'm not sure exactly why. So I started in 1987, and I, of course, started in uniform, driving a cruiser like everybody does. I did that for about 7 years in Cambridge. And then I was transferred to the detective branch, where my specialty turned out to be interviewing young children who were victims of sexual assaults. Through my career, I went overseas once to Kosovo, and that sparked my interest in going overseas again. And I went to Chad and Darfur on 2 occasions, and now I go around to schools and organizations and talk about my experience there.
In 2004, I was lucky enough to get a phone call from a lady from Washington who was running a company called the Coalition for International Justice. And they had just been contracted by the US State Department to go into Chad, Africa, and interview the victims there who were fleeing from Sudan, Africa. Darfur is the province, the western province in Sudan, and it's the portion where these atrocities are occurring, and it borders exactly with Chad. And that's why the refugee camps were set up in Chad. The man that we interviewed pretty much broke down crying as soon as he started talking to us. And he told us that about 3 hours before we had went and got him, he had just crossed the border, fleeing from his village, which had been attacked, and he'd watched his 2-year-old son, his wife, and his parents slaughtered in front of him. He cried, I cried, but I decided then and there I really had absolutely nothing to complain about, and I promised I would never whine again.
And when I name the people and make them real and tell them I hugged this lady as she cried and told me the story, or I saw the scars on this 17-year-old girl's body, they then equate it with a real person. We all have a heart, like it or not, even if, you want to be indifferent. If I can touch somebody's heart, then they start thinking, I should be doing something too.
I try never to feel hopeless about any speech, but as I said, the students, their energy, you can feel the energy and their emotional involvement before they've even done anything. They're already ready to give it their all.
Because they're the ones who have the motivation. A lot of older people, I've talked to some retirement groups, and although they were interested and said, good talk and so on, I could just tell that they all walked away and went back about their regular routine and didn't get that energy that I get talking to students who want to make a difference. And that motivates me when I talk to the students, because they want to get on board and they immediately come up and say, who do I call, what website, what can I do?
This picture here is a young girl who we were in an outlying village doing our interviews, and her name was Miriam. And she walked into the abandoned schoolhouse where we were doing the interviews in this village, and she walked in like this. She had a really, really prominent limp, but she was smiling, and she was just gorgeous, and her smile kind of lit up the room. And I remember thinking, this is weird. She's supposed to be a victim, and yet she looks so happy and so smiling. So we did the interview, and she told us how she and 2 girlfriends were gathering firewood outside their camp when 2 men on horses, Janjaweed, rode at them, knocked them over, and basically told them to lay on the ground and take their clothes off. The girls, they were young, and they kept fighting and getting up and running away. The girlfriends ran away, and so the men just targeted Miriam and kept riding their horses at her, knocking her over and telling her to lay down and obey what they were saying. She just kept refusing and kept getting up and trying to run away from them. And eventually she just frustrated them so much that they ended up shooting her twice. And she showed us at this time the 2 bullet wounds that were on her leg, which had permanently damaged her leg. And she managed to get up and survive. And so she's telling me this story, still smiling, and at the end she said, yeah, I was shot. but I'm not spoiled. She could still have a life, someone would still marry her, and her family still loved her because there was no embarrassment because she hadn't been raped. The girls that I talk to mostly want to know, how do they get involved? Can they email me? What kind of jobs they should train for to be able to do the same sort of thing.
I think the thing that bothered me the most, or has caused me the most upset and frustration, is the fact that here in Canada, when I'm a police officer, if we get the evidence to prove that someone's committing an offense, then we will go and make an arrest. We would track that person down until we found them. In both experiences in Darfur, I've done all these hundreds of interviews, found overwhelming evidence, in my opinion, photographs, physical evidence, people's stories, everything you need to prove that that person was involved in the crime and should be arrested. And yet, it's been, well, over 3 years since I was there, and there's been no arrest, so it eats me up every day.
When I first came back and started talking, I was fine doing it, and I think it just hadn't sunk in yet, sort of thing. So I was able to do the talks and not cry or anything and just sort of talk factual. I kind of shut down. I just stopped talking about it, stopped looking at the pictures, stopped emailing the people that I had met in Darfur, and pretty much became miserable. I knew enough to go to a counselor, and she told me I had signs of post-traumatic stress. And at first I couldn't understand it because I didn't witness any of the crimes, but we sort of determined that it wasn't that I had seen things, it was the fact that I had witnessed the stories, listened to them, and have no power now to do anything about them, that it's still going on and there's nothing I can do to stop it. So after some counseling and a lot of crying and whatever, and understanding what was wrong with me, I kind of got back on my feet again and started doing my talk. But I still cry, I still pretty much every day do something about Darfur. It's because of doing my talk. I've now met other people who have done UN missions, other people who've been to Darfur. People have written to me who have gone on my website or read one of the newspaper articles and said, I know what you mean about that feeling. I had it because I came back from wherever. Everybody else who's been somewhere like Darfur or have experienced something like that have the same feeling, so I know I'm normal, I guess. And it's good to get a letter from somebody saying, what you said, I feel exactly the same way. In my mind, it's the world. There's no, it doesn't matter that there's borders in between, it's the world. And if there's something going wrong in this part of the world, we should be doing something, or in that part of the world. It doesn't matter that there's a different government or it's a different country. We're all human, we should all have the same rights and the same safety.
So basically, a global citizen to me is someone who recognizes that although there are borders in this world, the responsibility to other human beings on this planet, and that our actions are correlated and interrelated, it means that I have to take responsibility for it.
People just need to be able to get past the magnitude of what's going on and realize that they really can, with some persistence, make some concrete change. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is not necessarily getting people to care, but getting people to turn their concern into action.
And I think for other people it may not be that extreme, that the whole world is their responsibility to look after, but even if it goes outside of their family now, to Canada, to North America, to whatever, as long as it grows just from outside of your own little world, I think that's a step in becoming a global citizen.